Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jeanette Wing, the Executive Vice President for Research and Professor of Computer Science here at Columbia University. Welcome to the AI Summit. Our plenary sessions began this morning on the Morningside campus, where we heard about fundamental scientific challenges to advancing AI, humanistic and societal challenges as AI becomes so pervasive in our daily lives, and how AI can help us tame catastrophic natural events. We then moved to Manhattanville at noon, where we heard about how AI will change leadership and the workforce in the business world, and how AI might change what we mean by human ingenuity and creativity. And now the event has moved to the medical campus. In planning this day-long event, we deliberately wanted to showcase in a very direct manner all the phenomenal research and educational activities in AI that we do here at Columbia University. AI truly reaches every corner of this university. I want to make one remark about AI in science before I talk about AI in medicine and healthcare. Not only has AI accelerated scientific discovery, but also the scientific recognition of the techniques behind these discoveries has accelerated. Just last year, only 12 years after deep neural networks triggered an AI tsunami, Jeff Hinton won the Nobel Prize in physics. And only 6 years after AlphaFold showed how machines can do protein folding prediction, Dennis Hassabis and John Jumper won the Nobel Prize in chemistry. Even the computer science community was surprised that computer scientists could win a Nobel Prize. To me, the low-hanging fruit in medical and health sciences for using AI is in analyzing images, for example, in radiology and pathology, analyzing biological data, for example, genomic data, and analyzing text, for example, electronic health records, and of course, medical literature. Machines are simply better at scaling up to finding patterns indiscernible to the human eye and to finding correlations across information that could not be processed in a human's lifespan. And machines don't get tired or cranky. But what I'm most excited about in thinking about the potential of AI and medicine is the ability to treat individuals for the specific problems they have. We can imagine conducting science, from basic science to clinical science, in completely new ways, where humans and machines work together, each doing what they do best, and together doing what neither can do alone. Today, in our 2 sessions on AI at CUIMC, the common theme is from small to large. AI in the mind, from the neurons in our brain to our mental health, and AI in cancer, from cells to systems. I want to also put in a plug for our keynote speaker, Sami Hadadin, at 5:30, who will talk about robots, where machines not just learn and adapt, but they move and think. Many believe that while robotics as a field has been around for decades, modern robotics powered by today and tomorrow's AI technology is the next frontier of AI. So please enjoy today's session. Thank you very much.
Hello, good afternoon, welcome. And I'm Ying Wei, I'm Professor of Biostatistics, and it's my great honor to kick off the first session of the CUIMC program at this AI Summit, Decoding the Mind from Brain to Mental Health. And in this session, we are going to explore how neuroscience and AI can come together to create impactful solutions to mental health. And I'm very proud to say that at Columbia, we are truly at the forefront of all these efforts. We'll be leading research and innovations in basic science, in statistics, in engineering, in healthcare informatics, social impacts, and public health. And in today's sessions, and we will start with 2 8-minute tech presentations and to showcase the cutting-edge AI research in that area. And in these presentations, and you will learn and how the innovative AI tools can spark the science breakthrough, and also how those brain-inspired AI can help us understanding the mental health better. And after this talk, and we will welcome Columbia experts in medicine, epidemiology, and nursing who has a first-hand experience observing how AI is changing the field of mental health, treatment and care, and also broader social impacts. And now, before I introducing the first speaker, so I would like to take a moment to highlight one AI initiative that particularly feel close to my heart. So that is a TRIL, and the Translational AI Laboratory for Health at the Mailman School of Public Health. So the TRIL is a school-wide research program and infrastructure at the Mailman, and was grown out of the AI/ML lab that is initiated in the Department of Biostatistics a few years ago. So at TRIL, and we are bringing together expertise in biostatistics, in engineering, healthcare, and public health, and try to tackle some of the most pressing issues in health and beyond. And I'm very delighted that our first speaker, Dr. Zhonghua Liu, an assistant professor of biostatistics, who is also a key member at TRIL. Dr. Liu graduated from Harvard University, getting his PhD in biostatistics, and also he specialized in causal inference, semi-parametric efficient theories, machine learning, statistical genetics. Before Zhonghua joined us from Columbia, he's also assistant professor at Hong Kong University. So in today's talk, he's going to share about his recent work integrating the AlphaFold that Jeanette just mentioned with Mendelian randomization to identify new protein target for Alzheimer's disease. So I think that also exemplifies the type of research we do at TRIL. So let's welcome Zhonghua. Thank you.
So, thank you, Ying, very much for the kind introduction. I'm very honored to be here. So today, I'm thrilled to share our recent research using AlphaFold for protein biomarker discovery and also structural change. So let's begin. So AI and causal inference, as my title in brain science. Causal inference is a branch of statistics. AI is very good at finding correlation patterns in complex data. But the correlation patterns alone is not sufficient. Causal inference, on the other hand, can find causality because correlation does not imply causality. So causal inference methods can distinguish true causes from misleading noise. That's why we do causal inference. So one of the biggest challenges in Alzheimer's disease research today is our brain changes actually begin decades before clinical symptoms appear. So by the time when a doctor see a patient's memory loss, cognitive decline, it's often too late for effective intervention. That motivates us to discover biomarkers that can predict Alzheimer's disease risk in the early stage. So we need early detection strategies to identify high risk or at risk individuals for Alzheimer's disease for early, more effective intervention. So plasma biomarkers, proteins circulating in our blood, offer a promising solution. So here you can see there's a drop blood here. We get a blood sample and we can measure the abundance of thousands of proteins in the plasma. On the right lower corner, you can see all the molecules. Those are the proteins. So plasma biomarkers can be predictive of Alzheimer's disease in the early stage before we observe symptoms. But which protein can be used as a biomarker? So that's the real challenge here. Causal inference as a branch of statistical methods can identify protein biomarkers for Alzheimer's disease. We say in statistics is like a detective game. So imagine I am a detective. So my job is to analyze complex data and try to find solid scientific evidence. In this case, we develop a new causal inference methods, in particular, Mendelian randomization methods that can separate true causes from noise. Using our methods, we found 7 plasma proteins. They are linked to Alzheimer's disease. As you can see from this figure, the 7 proteins. On the left, the red dots, they are protective proteins. On the right, the green dots, they are harmful proteins. So those are discovered by statistical methods. Here comes AI. So one of the proteins we identified is TREM2. For this protein, there's a missense genetic variation. So that variation is a SNP number here, located on chromosome 6. For 2 Alzheimer's disease patients, if one patient carries C allele and the other patient carries T allele, actually they will have different amino acid. So if you have C allele, your amino acid will be arginine. If you have T allele, your amino acid will be histidine. What's the implication here? The implication is if you have 2 different amino acids, you have 2 different protein sequences. And the protein sequence determine the 3D folding. And we use modern AI, AlphaFold 3, got a Nobel Prize, right? To predict the 3D structure change due to genetic variation. So even 2 Alzheimer's disease patients, if their genetic sequence are different, their protein structure might be different. So that offer our new insights into the disease etiology of Alzheimer's disease. Also provide new drug targets. And the drug should be developed, tailored for each patient's genetic sequence. That's precision medicine. So again, combining AI and statistics, in particular causal inference, we can have more reliable discovery of biomarkers in a more efficient way. Now we have biomarkers, we can build statistical models or AI models for disease prediction. We also can have drug targets for new drug developments. The future. AI will accelerate brain science, that's for sure, but we still need statistics to ensure reliability. Takeaway. AI is indeed powerful, but AI plus statistics is truly transformative. And I use our publication as a case study to show you, and I hope you are convinced. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Zhonghua, for sharing your work. It's very insightful. So our second speaker is Dr. Lee Duncker, and who is a computational neuroscientist and a new faculty member in the Columbia's Department of Neuroscience, the Zuckerman Mind-Brain Behavior Institute, and the Center of Theoretical Neuroscience. And Lee is a recipient of Simon Foundation Collaboration on Global Brain Transition into Independent World. And before joining Columbia, and Lee was a postdoc fellow at Stanford University and also completed a PhD in Gatsby Computational Neuroscience Unit at the University College London. So Dr. Duncker's lab centers around the cognitive flexibility and learning and aiming to understanding how neural network coordinates actions through motion control and language learning. So let's welcome Lee to share.
Thanks very much. Just trying to figure out the clicker. Okay, yeah, so as humans, being alive in this world, I guess we're used to doing all sorts of interesting and rich behaviors, and we're able to deploy these behaviors flexibly across different contexts. So just to give some examples, we can learn, plan, and execute highly skillful and accurate movements. We're able to engage in social interactions and pick up on subtle social cues and conversations to be able to communicate effectively. And we're also able to take abstract knowledge of the layout of a city and the subway system to maybe navigate across different campuses of Columbia today to attend these different events. So underlying all of these behaviors are really computations that humans and also other biological systems are really good at performing. And so in my research, I'm very interested in better understanding the underlying biological neural mechanisms that support these kind of computations, and also how multiple such computations might be learned in the same systems and then maintained as new information arrives constantly over a lifetime. Of course, studying this in the wild and in humans is kind of very complex. And so a common approach is to strip these computations down to sort of basic and core building blocks and sort of formalize this in simple controlled experimental task paradigms in a model organism. And so taking the example for motor control, for example, we could simply study motor planning and execution in a reaching task. And in a model organism, this then also often allows us to actually record from brains as animals perform these tasks that involve certain computations to then look at what neural circuits are actually doing as they compute. Okay, and in studying this, there are really two main approaches that are very popular in both my own research group, but also in computational neuroscience more general. One is a data-driven approach, where we can, sort of in the same spirit of trying to discover patterns in high-dimensional data, we can think of neurons that we observe as axes in a high-dimensional coordinate system, and then try to uncover a hidden structure in these high-dimensional data. And often for these simple stereotype tasks, this hidden structure actually turns out to be quite simple and stereotyped, and we can develop machine learning methods to extract it from data. Okay, so there's a lot of work on active development of new methods for machine learning that can do this. Okay, so this is direction one. And then the second approach is actually to step away a little bit from data and instead focus more on the task and try to translate the tasks that we train animals to do to the language of neural networks, and instead construct artificial systems that we introduce with, where we design task-relevant inputs and a set of task-relevant outputs, and optimize this in a network to mesh this input-output transformation in order to arrive at an artificial system that we think implements the same computations that we're interested in, and then use this as a test bed to come up with hypotheses about how the brain might do similar things. Okay, and again, this is a popular line of work also in my lab. But of course, to ultimately bring things back to the brain and how biological systems operate, it's really essential to kind of connect these two approaches and these two lines of work, right? If we uncover structure in neural data, then ideally, if we're interested in understanding computation, we would like to link that structure to sort of general principles around theories of how computations work in neural networks. And then similarly, if we have particular hypotheses, ideally we would like to be able to quantitatively evaluate them with experimental data to say, oh, this is also how the brain functions. Okay, and ideally this would involve some kind of predictions for follow-up experiments so that we can continuously update and refine our hypotheses to ultimately understand how the brain works. So this is still an active, this is difficult and still a very active area of research in the field. In my group, we're sort of interested in actually trying to combine these two different approaches to get the best of both worlds and build network models that are both informed by hypotheses that we derive from artificial networks, but also informed and constrained by data or biological detail that we know to be present in the brain. So this could be neural activity patterns, but also our architectural constraints or cell type structure. And so if we think about building these network models that really kind of operate in the coordinates of experimental data, then we're also able to use experimental designs like being able to artificially activate neurons in a computing circuit to probe these models further and also derive predictions for these kinds of experiments, which is a line of work I'm very excited about. Okay. So overall, in pursuit of this question of how biological neural systems compute, there's a lot of synergies with AI research, both in terms of neural data analysis and using pattern recognition and unsupervised machine learning to try to find structure in neural data. And then also in terms of using artificial systems that perform interesting tasks and interesting computations to try to use them as a test bed for hypotheses of how the brain might work. But then I think ultimately to really address the question of how the system functions and how the biological system functions, it's really important to also think about ways to connect this with experiments and neural data and really draw closer links between these different areas. And this is something that we're very interested in doing through a tight interplay of thinking about data that's recorded in experiments, theoretical work, and then also collaborations with experimental groups for new experimental designs. Okay. So with that, I would like to again thank the organizers for having me and organizing all of this, my group at Columbia, and thanks to all of you for your attention.
Thank you so much. So now I think I'm going to pass my baton to my wonderful, wonderful colleague, Dr. Jeff Goldsmith. And Jeff is my colleague, associate professor in biostatistics, and also our associate dean of data science in the Mailman School of Public Health. And Jeff is going to moderate the panel discussions for these sessions. Welcome.
Fantastic. I'm going to very briefly introduce the few panelists who have not given presentations so far and then start asking some questions. So thanks for bearing with me for just a couple of moments. So next to Zhonghua is Dr. Nathalie Moise. She is an internist, an associate professor of medicine, director of the MSci lab at the Center for Behavioral and Cardiovascular Health. Her work is dedicated to implementing mechanistically driven interventions in patients with coexisting mental and physical conditions. To her left is Dr. Nat Benda, who is an assistant professor of health informatics at the Columbia School of Nursing. Her research utilizes human-centered design methods to improve quality, safety, and equity of healthcare, with a special focus on developing health technologies and artificial intelligence. And to her left is Dr. Alyssa Davis, who is an associate professor at the Columbia University School of Social Work and a faculty affiliate in the Social Intervention Group. Her research focuses on the development of interventions to improve linkage to and retention in care for HIV and substance use services for marginalized populations. And so I think, again, those are very brief introductions for everybody, but I am thrilled to be here and have a chance to talk with you all about AI in the context of mental health. I'm going to start with a few sort of directed questions to each of the folks who have not given presentations, but from there have some more general things to ask as well. Dr. Moise, your research is often sort of contextualized by PTSD and depression in response to cardiovascular crises. And one of the things that you're very interested in is how behavioral health interventions can help mitigate the impacts of those. So I guess I wanted to give you an opportunity to comment broadly on that work and how you see AI as playing a role in that.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, so I think there are really three key areas that AI has the potential to really transform. One being detection, diagnosis, engagement, selection of treatment, and then finally actual treatment. So around diagnosis, these patients with depression and cardiovascular disease, these coexisting illness, you can think about it as having a trifecta, right? You have both conditions and a lot of evidence-based interventions that you could potentially implement in those individuals. And we've shown that these patients are less likely to be diagnosed accurately and usually have false negative rates. And so I really do think that AI has the potential to improve the efficiency and accuracy of diagnosis in these individuals. I think that I'm starting to see work in bots and machine learning as a way to kind of more accurately diagnose these patients and also uncover other diagnoses, right? So a lot of the times we're using these archaic screening tools and really starting to think about being able to predict diagnoses and more complex diagnoses. So maybe some patients have depression and anxiety. Maybe there's trauma that we're potentially undiagnosing. And then in the area of engagement and treatment selection, we've been developing tools to better engage patients from lower socioeconomic status. And we found that we're in the midst of designing an intervention where the tool would be placed with motivational interviewing, so AI-informed motivational interviewing, but perhaps staff delivered as a way to kind of reduce the digital literacy issues and the hesitancy that a lot of patients have in terms of using AI. Bringing this up, a lot of patients get very anxious. So having it staff delivered, but still AI-informed is a way for us to think about these implementation issues. And then I think this has been going on for a while now, but if you think about it, first-line treatment, only about 40 to 50% of patients actually improve with first-line treatment. So if you have depression, PTSD, and cardiovascular disease, very few people actually improve. And so finding a way to better select treatment for an individual patient, I think, could really revolutionize the entire work that we're doing, and finding a way to say, maybe you need an antidepressant, or maybe you're better served with CBT. Not just that, but again, I'm talking about the mix of cardiovascular disease and depression, but there are a lot of evidence-based behavioral interventions. It's hard for patients to do all at the same time. Is it better for you to do exercise or diet or reduce your smoking? Which is best for you? And I think they're really, for these more complex patients, I think there's a lot of potential. And then finally, treatment. I think the last generation of mental health apps, I think it's very clear that they weren't as effective without a human touch. And could this be better, potentially, I think, is something that a lot of us are very excited about. And even if not, potentially they could be these virtual assistants to therapists and make things more efficient and potentially more effective as well.
Fantastic, thank you. I do see panelists sort of nodding along as you go, so like feel free to jump in. You don't have to wait for me to ask questions. If any sort of quick thoughts or rejoinders from anyone?
I'll pick up on the personal touch piece next.
All right, great. Well, then maybe that's sort of the next thing that we can touch on. I know you spent a lot of time thinking about human-centered design and the role of individuals in the context of AI. And I guess maybe the floor is yours to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So I'd first kind of like to bring it back to some older policy as to why we became interested in this question of what do patients think about AI? So in 2016, President Obama actually signed what's called the 21st Century Cures Act. Many of you may be familiar with it, but it essentially prevents us from blocking any information that is about patients from patients being able to see that piece of information. And then it also resulted in things like open notes, where we know that patients are able to see that the notes their doctors are producing. So then I was working with some colleagues who had developed an algorithm that predicted postpartum depression during pregnancy, which, if it's accurate, could actually be very meaningful. So if we know that someone, for example, in their second trimester of pregnancy is at high risk of postpartum depression, we want to make sure that they have kind of the tools to cope and maybe can get into some proactive and preventative therapy. However, then comes the question of how do you inform the patient about this information? So, you could understand this isn't necessarily happening, but the patient could see there an electronic health record, postpartum depression risk 0.37. And many of you probably don't know what that means. As a patient, I wouldn't know what that means. So we wanted to think about how can we involve the patients in this conversation. So some of our colleagues first did a survey of patients in 2019 about what they thought for AI in general. And then thinking in this context, we wanted to know more about what patients thought about AI for mental health. Almost half of the patients thought that AI could make mental health somewhat or much better. It was a little bit less than in the somatic health survey. And we did find some differences, such that patients with lower self reported health literacy, males, and then patients that reported their race as Black or African American were actually more optimistic about AI for mental health. But then when we were thinking about how comfortable would you be having AI do some tasks for mental health as compared to somatic health related to diagnosis, assessment, and diagnosis delivery, they were less comfortable with all of the mental health related tasks. So overall, it's kind of a mixed bag and it's a bit nuanced as to what patients felt about this. But then we also allowed patients to have some qualitative responses in terms of their thoughts or concerns about AI for mental health. I'm going to read a couple. This is usually where I make enemies with the developers, but I do promise that I will bring it back. So one patient said, I think it will be biased, sexist, and racist. It will rely on old ideas of mental health care and not use current information. It will be used to ignore and bully patients. And so that was one of the more extreme pieces that we saw. And another one that I just wanted to point out, kind of getting back to the human touch piece. Human connection and understanding are crucial in mental health diagnosis and treatment. I finally found a doctor that made me feel understood, heard, and cared for. It resulted in effective treatment for my major depression and suicidal ideology after many years, and AI can't do that. So I think, patients clearly have some optimism, but also a lot of concerns related to AI, especially for something that can be as stigmatized as mental health. But going forward, what we have been thinking about is we know that AI can be very helpful and effective. So, how do we help health professionals and patients use it safely? And we've been doing some qualitative interviews, and in those situations, patients are very open to the idea of AI as we call it like a tool in the physician or provider or mental health professional's toolbox, but not as the ultimate decision maker. So things that we're trying to think about is how can we involve patients and health professionals from the beginning to say, is this AI being safely developed? What will be the actions that can result out of this AI? And then thinking even further forward to make sure that we give health professionals and patients enough information about the AI to say, is this safe and effective enough to be used in this particular context? So that's where we want to go next, is think about how can we design either educational tools or interfaces that help patients and health professionals, to your point, decide together about when to use AI safely and effectively.
Thank you very much. Again, anybody who wants to weigh in, please feel free. But maybe sorry, go ahead, yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, I don't love the quote that you raised. That's perhaps not the right word, but I think the first quote that you mentioned from the patient is around the potentials for bias and racism is really, really important, because I think that's what a lot of us are worried about. Is there's so much potential for AI to reduce health inequities, but we don't want AI to become just further exacerbating health inequities. And something that many of us really worry about, I think, is that a lot of these technologies are tested among predominantly white populations, or a lot of the genomics data or genetics data is coming from populations with European ancestry. And if they're not being tested among populations who are already experiencing health inequities, then how can we use AI to address some of these inequities? I think in particular, I'm really interested in the potential for AI for prevention of mental health disorders. And you think about, for example, like African American boys are disproportionately impacted by suicide risk, and some even earlier, as young as elementary school. How are these tools being used in this population? Are they providing input into the design of some of these AI-based tools? Because it seems like in a lot of the tools that are rolling out, that input's not necessarily there. And so if they're not providing input to the tools that are being developed, how can you ensure that they're being implemented correctly, or that they'll be feasible and acceptable to these populations?
And I'll provide just one quick reaction, if that's okay, that I think is really important. Is just to note that we can have the most predictive, highest performing AI, but when that information gets to the patient and the health professional and they don't trust it to make a decision, we've lost. And that work has been for nothing.
Several of you have talked a little bit about the sort of role of interventions and doing something that's a little bit like precision medicine. And actually, I wanted to bring it back to Zhonghua. You know, you've heard sort of a bit about the need to predict postpartum depression with some accuracy, or the effectiveness of interventions to sort of improve health outcomes. And I guess I sort of want to give you the opportunity to react to the possibility of either using causal inference or using traditional statistics or using AI or whatever it is to sort of think about guiding care in a variety of settings, whether it's understanding the potential effectiveness, the risk to a patient, and then delivering that in a way that's acceptable.
Oh, Jeff, you asked me a very big question. So let me try to say what I know. Maybe other panel discussant can add. Well, AI models are not so transparent. They are just, in general, they are black box models. So we don't know in general why it works and why it fails. When it works and when it may fail. At this stage, we still need to understand the algorithm they use for building complicated AI models, like ChatGPT and all kinds of AI models. In medical settings, we care about transparency, interpretability, unbiased, fairness, and all those topics are not addressed well in current AI applications and also developments. Actually, it's our responsibility, and our department should do more AI research using our statistical training and background to enhance interpretability, reliability, as I said, reliability, interpretability, and also uncertainty quantification. We are trained to quantify uncertainty. The current AI models, are they very stable? Are they very certain? We are not so sure. So we have a pipeline of research trying to do this type of research to address concerns in current AI applications. That's from a statistical perspective. That's what I have. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I would also echo that I think also in terms of studying systems, complex systems in the brain, I think there's a lot of challenges in really understanding high dimensional networks with billions of parameters and really having enough data to train them well, understanding how they operate, understanding why they make the decisions that they do. And yeah, I think there's a lot of rapid progress and figuring out how to translate that to actually having releasing something in the public sector like mental health or healthcare in general. I think yeah, I think we should be very careful and also design maybe having AI is sort of very exciting for many reasons, but then actually also some things that we want to do and we really want to understand are actually quite targeted and specialized. So I also wonder if maybe a direction forward is also to really hone in on specific tasks that we want help with or want to get to patients and actually have not general artificial intelligence, but very specialized intelligence there. And maybe that's more feasible.
Yeah, well, I guess sort of keeping that in mind in the goal of sort of centering the work that we do on patients and thinking about sort of patient-centered AI, I guess, are there certain things that you would like to see more of or certain advances you would like to see in the context of using AI to help benefit patients? This is open question, anybody?
I think to the point that was raised about things like thinking about uncertainty, thinking about how do we present these models, I think I probably seem like the person who's been a little bit more skeptical about AI to this point, and that's definitely not the case. I think we can all do a lot more together to think about when we do develop these models of uncertainty or we do develop these very highly performing risk predictions, thinking about how do we use what we already know about risk communication, which I know has been pioneered here at Columbia, and use those best practices to convey that information in a way that's easy for health professionals and patients to understand. When we think about that from an informatics perspective, it gets a little bit challenging because a lot of times you see these risk scores in electronic health records, which are more set up to kind of have columns of data. And what I think we could be working towards is using things like fast health interoperable resources to build data visualizations that can sit on top of the EHR in ways that are easier for health professionals to act on easily, and ways that it is easier to convey these kind of complex quantitative concepts to patients in a way that they can understand.
Yeah, I think I would echo that. I think the major issues, I'm speaking again from a primary care physician and also an implementation scientist, is how do we do this in a way that doesn't worsen our, the physicians are becoming very burnt out to some extent, right? And so now is the onus on physicians to be the ones to relay all of that information to patients in a way that they would understand. I think we still need to find ways to make this as efficient as possible without overwhelming the very, very already overwhelmed healthcare system.
Yeah, and I know there are a number of us who are interested in just-in-time adaptive interventions with wearables and the sort of thing that maybe puts the power in the hands of the patient so that they can take care of their health and they can have tools to support them when they need it without having to necessarily access the healthcare system, which many people don't have great access to for all sorts of reasons. Maybe they don't have insurance, maybe there's stigma and discrimination barriers there. But I think we still have a long way to go to get to just-in-time adaptive interventions that are really effective and work well for patients.
Can I, just for the sake of folks who may not know exactly what you mean, can you sort of talk a little bit about what you mean by a just-in-time adaptive intervention and something that might sort of work in the context of promoting mental health?
Yeah, so something that I and others are interested in are wearing like smartwatches or wearable devices that might check in with you, for example, maybe if your stress levels are high, and just check in and see how you're doing. And it could potentially be used for cognitive reframing or something for adolescents who may not be doing well. And by interrupting this kind of negative thought processes and helping them reframe things in a way that's beneficial for them, it could potentially prevent depression or anxiety from developing or worsening over time. So that's one example. I know other people are interested in using wearable devices to help people who have alcohol use disorder by identifying, for example, if they're close to a bar or an area where they normally may be tempted to use alcohol, intervening and presenting them with alternate options for things that they could do, like maybe going for a walk or other things to distract them. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Zhonghua, I'm not going to put you on the spot again because you got mad at me last time. But I'll say a couple of words and then you can jump in if you see fit. This seems like, again, one of the areas where there's real room for collaboration, meaning the sort of just-in-time adaptive treatment is it's unclear when it works, and there's sort of a big infrastructure for doing causal inference in this area for understanding whether or not a treatment delivered in a particular moment is likely to be effective. And so again, that just sort of seems like an area for collaboration.
Yeah, for sure. You point out a very important collaboration opportunity. Maybe we can discuss more after this panel discussion. There are indeed lots of positive synergies between statistics, AI, and also medical science. I personally collaborate with computer scientists, neurologists, all kinds of medical researchers on this campus, and I benefit from that collaboration. Back to your question, I'm a statistician, so from this perspective, what I can offer, or our department can offer, in general, is to design better study designs, like randomized experiments or observational study, or by data integration, medical records, genomics, all kinds of phenotype, variable device. All those data that are available now, we can integrate them using statistical principle. Before we apply black box AIs, We want to make sure the data we put into AI, those data are really high quality, unbiased data set. Because if you have a biased data set, you put into AI, you get biased results. So biased data in, biased results out. AI cannot correct bias by itself. So we have a lot of potential collaborations, as I said, between computer scientists, us, and a lot of medical science researchers on this campus. That's my view.
Maybe I'll add something, because I guess sort of on this point of black boxes and sort of the goal to, I mean, the session is called Decoding the Mind, and I think if we present a black box with a lot of data sets, eventually, maybe we could ask it to explain the mind back to us, but I think there's also like a lot of work for really figuring out why the AI identifies certain patterns, so like why are there particular behaviors that that maybe we could pick up on before the onset of depression, or are there particular interventions that work well in depression, and why is there something about the state of the brain that we could learn about to really gain insight into the sort of fundamental root of a lot of the therapeutic targets, and maybe also design new therapeutic targets. And I think as a neuroscientist, this is sort of like the spirit of a lot of the work that we do to try to actually uncover like how the system works, and then design maybe approaches for probing it, or like intervening in it around that. And I think that there's a lot of use for black boxes and AI within that, but I guess I'm a strong believer that we still sort of need a human, or like a communicator in the loop to try to really get to the how and why questions, which I think are still hard to answer with black boxes.
And I do think it is getting better, but when we ask patients about their priorities related to AI, the thing that they said was most important was that they understood their own individual risk factors based on what the AI had predicted. So I know there are ways such as like SHAP values, for example, to help kind of break down the black box and understand what those are. But it is really important to the health professional to figure out what kind of treatment someone may need, to know a little bit what's behind that. And it's important to the patient so they know which risk factors may be mitigated versus not mitigated. In terms of thinking about collaboration, as someone who is here representing the School of Nursing, I told them this earlier, my dirty little secret is I'm not a nurse by training, but I would be remiss not to say that, it's important to make sure we always hear about developers, we always hear about statisticians, we always hear about, physicians and health professionals. Nursing, as we know, kind of in polls nationally every year, is the most trusted profession, amongst the United States. So I think going forward, it's important that we also, when we're considering our, developers who do the really intense, important computational work that I don't understand, but really appreciate, and, the physicians that may be delivering some of the news, that we also think about how we can leverage nurses and the trust that they have with patients to maybe think about doing some of that risk communication or some of that kind of treatment decision-making.
I had always thought that statisticians were the most trusted profession, but I was maybe not right about that. But it is, I mean, it's sort of interesting to think a little bit about sort of the breadth of folks who are on the stage now. We are in a session called Decoding the Mind from Brain to Mental Health. And we have sort of on one hand, like somebody very focused on understanding what's happening in a particular amount of neural circuitry when a monkey chooses to reach to the right instead of reaching to the left, all the way through like how folks interact with patients and systems, and seeing sort of what that sort of the patient experience of AI in a healthcare setting is. And so like I think in that sense, the sort of small to large and also the sort of brain to mental health is just a really exciting opportunity for collaboration. And I appreciate that everybody is sort of focused a bit on that. One of the things that, in our last couple of minutes, I know has been sort of interesting for me is just the rapid pace of change over the last few years and what AI is capable of, how much people sort of think about this and interact with it. And I guess I sort of want each of you maybe to reflect a bit on how you've adapted to that change, how you've sort of seen your own work changing a little bit, whether or not this is what we always do, is adapt to change, or if you see that there's sort of something different in the acceleration and adoption of AI in the work that you do.
Yeah, I'm very excited about AI. So I try to incorporate AI or integrate AI into our statistical research. So we have a pipeline of research. as I said, there's a positive synergy between statistics and AI. AI can help statistics make a computation faster, and the statistics can enhance reliability, robustness, interpretability of AI. So they can help each other. So the positive synergy is what have been working on. So try to learn as much as I can, the new technology, and also bring into statistical research.
I think for me, it used to take us years to design our intervention, leveraging user-centered design and implementation science and designing all of these digital tools, incorporating patient feedback, physician feedback, doing the trial design, conducting the trial. And so it would take us, you have a 5-year grant, it would take us years and years to do that entire process. And I can already see, as we have our new crop of grants, that things are going so much faster. You're able to use AI to start thinking very quickly, even creating some of the patient-facing materials. Things are just going a lot faster in terms of how we're designing our interventions. And I think the utility, hopefully in the future, is that we might even be able to do some simulation of these trials that used to take years and years for us to conduct. And in some ways, there's been this thought that implementation science would help us address the 17-year gap between an evidence and practice. And in some ways, it's making us take even longer because we're studying all of these healthcare system issues at the same time. And so being able to leverage AI to even more rapidly code and analyze data, I think it's just really, I think there's a lot of potential, I think, in many ways to speed up the evidence that we're seeing.
And people may be sick of hearing this quote, but there was a writer a while that was quoted as saying, I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so I can do my art and writing and not the other way around. And I think that really builds well off Dr. Moise's point that let's think about what AI can do from kind of a research and a patient care perspective that are more of the tasks that don't require that human touch. Thinking about, how we accelerate having it help us build some of our consent materials, things of that information, and then help get, health professionals and patients back to the tasks that humans are truly good at.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a really exciting time. I think there's a lot of potential for AI. And in particular, I think expanding access to services and outreach to people who don't have access to more traditional forms of healthcare services and helping to reduce health disparities in that way. So I think it's very exciting.
Yeah, I think also maybe, so I guess historically, a lot of the neural networks started in sort of theoretical computational neuroscience and of course also computer science, but now I think increasingly AI and neuroscience have diverged a bit. There were definitely early conversations in my career where we tried to figure out how can we understand intelligence in the brain so eventually we could build artificial intelligence, and now that's kind of happened and turned out we didn't have to understand how the brain works. But I think it's sort of shifting a little bit, asking the right question about how the brain works. So what sort of contributions can we still gain from computational theoretical neuroscience or neuroscience in general, and carry that back over to AI. So I think a big theme is also data efficiency and energy efficiency. And I think right now a lot of the problems that we're solving in AI we're kind of able to solve with more resources. And I think that's putting a strain on our planet, and also eventually the cap on how much money can we spend on building these flexible systems and larger systems, bigger systems with more data. So I think we can really, I'm hoping to also learn more about how the brain solves similar problems with much fewer examples, much fewer resources, much less energy consumption, to eventually, hopefully, close that gap between artificial and biological intelligence a little bit more, and draw some inspiration from neuroscience in the future.
Thanks, y'all. The little yellow light telling me to wrap things up is starting to blink. And so what I'm going to do in closing is just sort of comment again that it's been very exciting to hear from each of you. I think even coming from very different perspectives, it's wonderful to hear about the overlapping interests, the sort of goal of bringing AI to help decode the mind and address issues in mental health. So thank you all very much.